I got the download as well.
Awesome. You guys ready to get started here?
Yep.
So, welcome back to the Archery CoachCast. This is episode, I think, number 5. I'm not even 100% sure, just because we have so many coaching discussions that they all run together. But this
Number 5,
episode,
you're right.
what's the number 5?
Yep.
So this episode was originally, we were just going to talk about the setup, right? We'll talk about the setup as part of the NTS, which we will try to get to. However, there's some more, for the sake of explaining, we're going to talk about some more pressing and important coaching issues that involve kids, because 2 specific situations came up in one of the coaching forums. And they're very, very common things that happen as a coach dealing with youth archers. One situation, we're just going to dive right into that, Larry, okay?
Yep. I'll shoot the first one.
Yeah, I'll preface the situation, and I don't want to, for purposes of recording, I don't want to flip around on screens and whatnot. And I'm going to leave names and locations out of it. But so the one situation was a youth barebow shooter who was struggling with consistency, lots of negative self-talk. That shooter was shoots with another shooter who their scores are very similar. But that shooter just was how can I explain it?
When competing against others other than their friend, they did reasonably well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But when they compete against this one friend, they do poorly.
Correct. Yeah. And like I said, I think that's a very common theme where we see kids who perform great in practice. They maybe even perform great in pin shoots for Joad. They may perform great in new places with new people. But there's this situation where they're not able to put it all together when people who are maybe direct competitors, maybe they're friends in the same program, but in the same class. It's stuff that we see often in Joad and S3DA. So you want to speak to some of that, Larry, because I think the discussion we are actually having prior to recording a little bit even has some influence here. But
right. Yeah, we run into this a lot. There's one certain situation where an athlete performs poorly. And they do it not once, but multiple times in this one situation. And so that means lack of mental discipline. And we use these general coaching terms. Well, they're not keeping their head in the game. They aren't staying focused, right? And all of those terms sound great, but they're not defined. So when you tell this student, well, you have to stay focused, what does that mean? I have no idea. And the student, you might have an idea, but does your athlete have an idea what that means? Well, no. And so they're focusing or thinking about score and result, typically, and have no means to direct their focus to what they need to direct it to. And so unless you have a method to define what they need, where they need to direct their attention, unless you have a method to define that for this student, you're not talking on the same page and you're not making any headway and they suffer.
Right.
Okay, so this was
I was able to pull it up. So let me read it a little bit more clearly.
Okay.
So 2 friends, one almost always outshoots the other friend. and has been shooting 4 years longer. They're like 14 years old. That's the ballpark. That's the age range we're talking about here. But when they shoot on different bales, this other friend has the trouble, they're great. But when they're on the same bale, they end up shooting on the same bale. And like, if one gets ahead of the other, this specific friend starts falling apart. Like that's when, and I think that we can clearly see that there's a focus on score happening when it's this situation. I bet you when things are great, they're great. But as soon as there's a hitch, you know, and it says, how can you get a younger girl to manage the frustrations and stay focused on their own shooting? And in this experience, make this go away when is there something that can help the shooter? It's suspected that there's some jarring back and forth, joking, maybe not joking. Nobody really seems to know, because unless you're standing there with these two shooters, you know, so we're talking about impressionable teenagers. We're talking about kids being kids, but yet applying the focus to the shooting. So that's the one situation. And then the other one is the bare bow shooter, who's really breaking down, maybe some tears, getting angry, throwing tantrums, you know, on the shooting line, stuff like that. So let's talk about the two friends that are shooting together. How do we juggle that first? I guess I just wanted to be more clear. I was able to pull those up.
Yeah. So when they're shooting with this competitor friend, they are focused on score. In fact, the other person's score and how the other person is better than them.
Right.
And they're making judgments about themselves compared to the friend.
Right.
And also thinking about the scores. So misplaced focus.
Yeah. So their present thinking is them thinking about the friend's score and how that
in the present, right. And in the future about, well, this is all over and they beat me again.
Right.
Right. And they've judged themselves in a bad light because of that end result. Yeah. So we have to get away from that. You know, if you shoot a 6, that doesn't make you a bad person. That's one thing we have to teach them.
Yeah. I think you also find adults do the same thing. For sure. I can, for one, give a perfect scenario of how that happened to me at the Classic 2 years ago, going into the eliminations. I was the 10th seed going into the bare bow eliminations. I shot against my friend Daniel Chen. He wasn't my friend at the time, but we've become friends since. Daniel, I bet you I scored 30 more points than he did going into qualifications. He was so determined. He shot one of the highest first round elimination scores of the entire field. I only lost by like 6 points, but his first end, he shot a 10-10-9. And in bare bow, if you know bare bow, that's a big deal.
That's a big score.
That's a big deal.
And you saw it in neon lights.
Yep. And my first thought was, holy crap, I have to play catch up now.
Yeah.
And instead of just riding the wave of, nah, doesn't matter, anything can happen, let's just concentrate on making your best shot, I went down that rabbit hole. And immediately, and I still didn't shoot bad, but I didn't shoot to my highest potential. I've shot much, much better. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you're playing catch up. And in order to, and it's very difficult to get yourself out of that mindset when you're a kid, let alone an adult.
Yeah.
And, you know, competitiveness is great. There's no question that being competitive is great. But when you get to the point, if you start letting what others are doing around you seep into your focus, that leaks into your process, you're sooner or later, that's going to catch up with you.
Yeah. So had I been your coach and right there with you at the time, instead of officiating, being head official of the event, okay, I'd have probably said a couple things to you.
Let's hear
Number
them.
one, how many arrows do you have to shoot?
And I probably at that point in time, I would have said like 3.
9 more. I got 9 arrows
9
to
arrows.
catch up.
Yeah.
And then I would have said what?
You would have said how many arrows, and then you would have said no, 1, because you only shoot 1 arrow at a time.
Right. So, and that's all you have control over is the one that's knocked on the string right now.
Right.
Okay, so I would have reminded you of that. All right. Second, if I had been your coach, we would have been communicating back and forth. We would have had a what I call my focus map plotted out for you, and where you are to guide your focus when you set your stance, when you knock the arrow, when you set your hands. What focus are you to have? Okay, and what kind of focus? And then I would have reminded you, okay, now, of all these steps that you're working through, which is the most important? Because one of them is, and that is loading your back, transferring into your back, and using that to complete the shot. It's the most important thing you do. And I would have reminded you that that is your process. And when it's time to finish that process, engage in that process, you need to be engaging by feel.
Right.
And you would have had a mantra to remind you of that feel. So I would have first got you in the game. You have 1 arrow here, and then you have to execute this 1 arrow with the feel in your back. Got to load that back. Got to do the hold. And that gets you back in the now, in the moment, and executing on something you can control. And I probably said, now after the arrow leaves the string, you have no control. So where it hits, it hits. You have to accept it. Yeah. So I would have said those couple
like that.
things to you. We would have had a history.
Yeah, I like that.
What was that, MJ? Could you repeat?
Yep, I like that. I like that idea. And I find that there is, it depends upon the individual as to whether that process thinking sometimes will get in their way, and they become overthinking, to where sometimes I will, in lieu of the process, create a distraction and more or less an effort to leave archery and go somewhere enjoyable. And then when they hear the click of the arrow on the string, the individual or the entity within them realizes, oh, okay, I got to shoot an arrow. And then they proceed without thinking. If they've done pretty well up to that point, they know how to shoot an arrow. And it's a matter of breaking the spiral, that death spiral of, oh my God, thinking, to, oh, I'm going to shoot, thinking.
Right. Yeah. Calling themselves into the present. Yeah, you have to devise different ways to do that. And that snap of the string on the knock helps with that. Because when that string snaps on the knock, you better be in the present. And yeah, many get to staying with the analytical thinking, the mind managed thinking, when they have their back loaded. But we need to shift away from that mind managed or analytical to engage with the feel. And different, like MJ says, different archers have different cues that you use. and different ways to help them get to that feel.
Yeah, no, I think the disconnect could be with maybe some coaches who don't have that experience with like a new level 2 coach that's never been in the competition format and maybe doesn't
Right.
have that. I think the disconnect is, how do you teach these um, uh, lesser experienced coaches to communicate that with their shooters? And I think that's where the trouble is with these growing teams and
Yeah,
all the stuff
that's
we got going on.
right. Yeah, that's missing. That's why I've written my latest book. And
Go ahead, shameless plug.
I am very impatiently waiting for the publisher to ass in gear and work on it.
And
So,
for some reason you're on a lag. I don't know why, which is okay.
yeah.
We just can't hear it right away. I think both of us have to not be talking, so there's no audio coming through. Then we can hear you clearly. So
Yeah. So yeah, I've written my book with a method for communicating how and where an archer is to guide their focus.
Yeah.
And their mind managed focus, that's checking things off the list, like setting bow hand, setting release hand. That gets you into present. But when it's time to execute your contraction expansion, that you better be doing by feel, just a general awareness of the feel. Like MJ said, they know how to shoot the shot. Be aware of the feel.
Yeah. Kids have a difficult time understanding the feel, for sure.
Right. Their brain is still developing. So for all the coaches out there, be aware that the human brain develops until you're probably 24 or 25 years old. Right. So in another couple of years, MJ, our brains are going to be fully developed, because we're going to hit that 25-year mark and off we go.
MJ, why don't you comment on that? Because I know you had started saying something before.
Well, it's interesting to understand, and there are several exercises that can use so that they have that understanding of what that feel is. And many will do alternative sports or have done sport activities. And one would be just throwing a ball. And you'd run the exercise of throwing a ball into a box. And then you tell them, okay, now it's critical that the ball hits the box. So I want you to be specific or aim throwing the ball in the box. And they'll look at you stupid. There's no aiming and throwing the ball in the box. You just throw the ball. So the part of them that knows how to throw the ball will throw the ball. The part of them that knows how to shoot an arrow will shoot an arrow. It's a matter of allowing that entity, that part that has been trained, to perform. And the performance without detail is pretty successful in many cases. It's when you attempt to really perform, do better than what you have done thus far, it's over. Yeah. You start aiming, throwing darts, you're going to buy beer all night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
True story.
I hit upon another good demonstration. If you have a floor that has square tiles on it, you can have your athletes walk across the tile floor from one side to the other. Back and forth is easy, right? They're aware they're walking, but they're doing it by feel. Walking is natural. We've done a lot of it. Okay. Now have them walk across again without stepping on a crack Oh my.
Okay. All right.
Now you have a major difference. Now you are trying to mind manage each step where your foot goes, and you're looking at the cracks. And this is how some people shoot archery, by trying to guide their sight pin on the middle. It's like walking across a tile floor and not stepping on the cracks. Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Muscle tenses up, you perform poorly instead of smoothly. So we have to devise ways. And
When that tension,
Go ahead. Go ahead, MJ.
when that tension rises, when the attention rises and the whistle blows, and now this is for score, they have to realize they just have mainlined adrenaline. And an exercise that sometimes is useful is I'll have the archer do everything once they're on the line in slow motion. And I say super slow motion. And that means that it takes 10, 15, 20 seconds for the arrow to clear the quiver. I want them to be fully aware of the weight of the point of the arrow and how abrasive that shaft feels, how noisy it is to get it up into the air. And I want the shot process, the execution of the shot, to take 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh,
because that feel that Larry was talking about has to happen, because that adrenaline that you have just shot up enhances everything. It's as if you just pulled somebody else's release aid out of the bag. Doesn't feel at all. That tab on the string, the string now feels like sandpaper. It's so abrasive. The mold mark in your grip, oh my God, how did it get to be so sharp? Those acuity things are just so enhanced that if you can have them do a shot in super slow, if it starts to move too fast, they go right back to the beginning, because I want them to have the total immersion in what the shot actually feels like internally, because that internal has that acuity because of the adrenaline. Their eyes are seeing corrections that much faster. The stabilizers, I've sat behind too many shoot-offs and watched the stabilizer rod bounce an inch, and they're shooting baby 10s. Give me a break. There's no way it's sitting still. However, you'll talk to those archers, then they'll say, boy, oh boy, my dots died in the middle. Ain't no way. But they hallucinated, or they convinced the part of them that was going to shoot that it was okay to shoot when it was bouncing like that. Mm-hmm. And same thing with any other sport that's out there. You watched the game last night when that kid from California had to sink a 3 to tie it up. There was no thought about balancing on a foot, or the grip of the ball, or how far it had to go. Yep. Just dribbled out on the court and shot the basket mindlessly.
Yep. Because why? Because he's trained for that moment, literally his entire life.
Yeah, and he was instantly in the present, not concerned about past or the future or the result. Yeah. So he engaged with his body's feel to make the shot.
Yeah. That whole concept, MJ, is like it's a profound drill to do. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because I'm so going to do that tomorrow with my entire team. But I mean, to really turn the music off, tell the parents you got to be quiet, and have the kids go through that process in super slow motion, and then maybe even have them take their notebooks, their journals, and write out the details of what was happening to make them reflect on it. I mean, and document. That is your shot process. That's your real shot process. How many people have done that? I mean, that is literally gosh, that's such a good thing. I can't even say how excited I am to give that a go.
So before I wrote my book, Core Archery, I had written a document that I had used for 5 or 6 years about the steps of shooting form. And I gave those steps great thought for weeks and weeks and weeks, and stood something like what MJ talked about, and did this slow motion, not that slow as MJ described, but slowly, thinking.
You'd be surprised how slow you really are.
Thank you.
You too. Listen, everyone. So I record podcasts with John Demmer and Grayson Partlow for the Barebow Project constantly. Those two, this is an archery thing. Those two constantly bust on each other. They bust on me. I bust on them. Then I record with you two knuckleheads, and it's the exact same thing all over again, just a couple different generations going on. And it's like listening to two brothers banter back and forth at each other. Oh my gosh. That's archery though. I mean, let's face it, it really is.
Better looking.
You're the
better looking of the two.
Yes, we know.
I'm the older, more intelligent,
handsome.
We're looking.
Oh, we should though bring that full circle. Coach when we have a chance. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, MJ. What were we gonna say?
I have been fortunate. One of the more interesting games, or one of the more interesting observations, is I have introduced visually impaired to shooting a bow, and these two individuals were 5-on-5 soccer players, so they're blind, and or they can see but very little, and had never felt or touched a bow, and their introduction was to feel the bow. They felt the grip, they felt the rest, they felt the curve of the limb, they felt the abrasiveness of the string and how the tab, and that it is so intuitive, and it is such a thing that creates their awareness, their sight by feel, and it's just an incredible learn that sighted people just blow off, and they miss a lot until becomes critical.
Yeah.
Right.
Can we piggyback off of that concept of teaching the feel, and how do we have these new coaches take that and turn it back into like this young shooter that's struggling with the friend that's shooting, or is maybe even intimidated a little bit by shooting with this other person? Or so how do we do that? How do we draw them back? I mean, I know what I do, but I want to hear from you guys. And you guys have both coached at the Olympic Training Center. You both have coached internationally. How do you do that with even your newest shooters, using club equipment and trying to bring them into that process?
What I do is we develop our list of steps, and I try to establish with them, and it takes a lot of repetition for the young ones, right? Which is the most important step? And that is backloading and using the contraction expansion. So if that's the most important one, then that's where our focus must be. And that focus must be by feel. So I try to define this so that when I tell them, focus on the feel of your back as you're executing the shot. They have something specific to do. And over a great amount of time, they will get that feel. But it's communicating with defined terms and having that common understanding with your student. To just tell them to say, well, you have to stay focused, doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah.
You know, because they'll think something different every time. And so by having some defined terms and defining the most important part of the shot, which is not the score. So we're teaching that it's not the score that's most important. It's what you are doing with your body that you can control, yeah, and how it has a feel. Yeah. So that line of communication has to be established and repeated, repeated, and repeated.
MJ, how about you?
It changed the value of this thing. And if you'll explain that if they allow and walk up to a shot or a target face or whatever, and explain that it's 3 mils of parchment that is now determining their value in life, yeah, just shred it. Just tear off a piece and say, this can't define me, and shred a piece to more or less explain that it's just a piece of paper that you're poking holes in. Another game to play with these two competitors or with the entire group is to shoot something other than a 30. If you change it to where they have to shoot 3 scoring arrows, and those 3 scoring arrows have to total 23, they'll shoot that first arrow and they'll look to the mathematician there and say, oh, what do I got to do now? And the next one's kind of a chunk. The first one was an 8, and then the next one's kind of a chunk, and it's a 6. Oh my God! Now what do I got to do? So you're creating a thought and a purpose for every arrow that has to be shot. So and 2, it devalues that center, that 10 it is the same because I've chosen, or that 6 is the same. If I'm standing outside and there's a breeze, I'm aiming to hit a 6 and allowing it to drift into the middle. So I have to change the value of the target face, yeah, to wherever I choose to shoot is good. And by changing the score, the optimum score to 23 or 26 or something odd, then at the same time, you'll allow that person that is not necessarily the best, if they shoot odd numbers or they miss a number, the likelihood for them to win that match is enhanced. Because the guy that shoots nothing but 10s values 10s more than a 7. And they'll have a tough time not shooting it in the middle. You want to play a game on a blue and white face? Shoot a 300 with no X's. Can't be done.
Yes. Yeah.
Can't be done.
Yeah. Or with only 10 X's. Or yeah. You can take
right. Yeah.
Make a short deck of cards with just 10 cards. Ace for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or ace could be a 10, however, or a face card could be a 10. Just have those 10 cards in your deck. And so you have two or 3 or 4 competitors on the line. Draw a card. If it's a 6, everybody has to shoot a 6. If you miss, you're out. Okay, draw the next card. maybe it's a 2. So you have to shoot a 2. Anybody that misses is out. So you can play a game like that, or mix the rules there somehow, but get focused off the middle and onto, well, I've got to shoot a good process to hit where I hope to hit.
That's outstanding information. It really is. That to go back on, I do want to piggyback off of what Larry had said just about the feel aspect. The one thing that I do in barebow, and honestly, not just barebow, and for all of my competitors, in order to learn or teach them the feel, I mix up the drills a lot. But a lot of times those drills are doing the same things, just in a different format. So it's not redundant and boring. Blind bail is like the holy grail of drills, in my opinion, but it's not the only drill, and you can still accomplish similar things with blind bail by doing other drills. And I know, like we've talked about, I call it the best drill only because for me, it's definitely been like one of the best carryover drills to barebow. And that's when it's kind of a combination of what I call draw holds, when you aim floating the tip of the arrow. So like behind me, when you're at full draw on barebow on the 18-meter game, if your 6 o'clock aim is right here. Some people aim on, some people aim low. I do that, what John Demmer calls a lollipop. That's where I aim. That's where I like to aim. I don't like to put it on because I can put the tip of the arrow in the middle all day long because it's like putting a pin in the middle. It's easy. It's natural. It's what I always did. But it's the separation of the shot where I get kinks. I don't like aiming that way in barebow. But the more that you get comfortable holding that tip of the arrow on your aim point, whether it's there or in the middle or whatever, the more you get comfortable with that, the easier it becomes, and you recognize the feel. So if you do draw holds, and whether it's 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or doing a ladder of draw holds, so you're going all the way up to 30, 45 seconds and then coming back down as an exercise movement, as a strength building drill, the more that you do that, the more comfortable it becomes for a shooter. Likewise, the more you do blind bail, the more comfortable and repeatable, and the easier it is for you as a shooter to remember what that proper release is supposed to feel like, what that proper follow through is supposed to feel like. Listen, there's a reason blind bails feel so much better, because we close our eyes and we're able to, kind of like what MJ was talking about, concentrating on that very finite detail. We're taking part of the aim out of it altogether. Your senses automatically heighten. So the goal of archery is to shoot as many perfect shots, well, not perfect, but as good as possible shots as you can. So the more of those shots that you shoot, the more improvement you will get. If you just stand at 18 meters and you're not working on all those other things, your progress will happen, but it's definitely going to be a little bit less of an incline. But if you start implementing those drills, well, you're shooting virtually perfect shots doing those drills, or as close to thereof as you can, you're automatically going to get better. And I would do that with these kids that are having a hard time focusing. I would implement these drills. There's performance points in archery. It's an athletic endeavor. Treat it as such, and then teach them this is how the feel is, because you need to draw back, you need to hold, you need to float the tip of your arrow in that spot that you aim, and get used to it. And as John, my favorite comment from John Demmer was enjoy the aim, enjoy it. Don't overthink it, enjoy it. And when you do that, that doesn't matter what the sport or what the discipline is, enjoy it. Don't obsess over it. And that's probably my go-to from a coaching standpoint, but you guys definitely have more experience than I do.
Yeah, we'll be implementing some of these techniques with our upcoming class on target panning.
Yes.
And learning to shoot beyond or through target panic, so that you can get to that good shooting beyond it. and it takes techniques, and those techniques are run with the mind, because most everybody with target panic has the physical skills to make a good shot.
Yeah, we do have 3 people signed up for that class right now. So
Okay, good.
we need a minimum of 8. So if you guys are on the fence, you have questions, message us. But you definitely want to sign up for that class. If you don't necessarily have like full-blown target panic, but you might have some aiming anxiety. You might have moments where you just flinch like crazy. And this is one of those classes that you can take in order to address that. That's why it's called.
If you're a coach, if you're just coaching,
Yeah,
take the class.
yeah, take the class. That's right. Take the class, because it's going to teach and talk about a lot of the stuff that we even talked about today to help deal with that or combat that. So I knew I called it. MJ, before we even logged on, I messaged Larry and I was like, I'm telling you, this discussion's going to go a lot longer than we anticipate, because we usually try to keep it around like 30-35 minutes. And here we are, 35-40 minutes into this.
40 minutes
session.
in.
Yeah. So we'll have to circle back and maybe touch upon the other one next time, and then pick up with the shot process on a future episode.
If you look at other sports, out there, whether it's basketball or tennis or baseball or so many of the other, that each one of them will have drills to learn the skill.
Right.
Tennis, if somebody's working on their backhand, they have a machine shooting that yellow ball at them, and they'll spend 30-40 minutes doing nothing but stepping into the backhand to make sure that it operates in a free-flowing motion. Stand in a batting cage and learn. And if I'm hitting nothing but grounders, obviously I'm coming over the top of the ball. So it's a matter of figuring that out. There's no point in playing 9 innings if all I'm going to do is hit grounders. If I have a team that has a tough time dribbling and or passing, we're not going to shoot any baskets that day. We're going to work on dribbling drills. Right. And if you break the components into, as Larry described, each one of those processes, and a steal from Frank Pearson, our buddy, that is not a brother, but kinda, almost. Anyway, he would take the list of processes and throughout a practice regiment, analyze each one of them to the degree of, well, it was okay, but it wasn't the best. Whether it's a grip or the finish of the shot, or whether it was the release or the aiming, whatever, each one of those would get an individual dot throughout the practice process. And out of the 12 steps that the person has determined, they're going to end up with a 3 or 4 or 5 of them that are going to have the most dots. That just now determined by next practice regiment. And so if I got a lot of dots on my hand pressure, or I torque the bow, that's my next blank bail challenge and opportunity to learn more. Is all I'm going to do is work on my hand pressure and change it around. One of the interesting things that I think people don't realize is that until I know how wrong feels, how am I going to learn right? So go in there and just manhandle that grip. Just give it one of those, so that when it goes relaxed, you now understand the difference between that and that. And so you experiment with overarching. If I do this and shoot an arrow, now I know that's wrong. Until I learn to do this, until I understand wrong, I begin to search the entire system to figure out what I did wrong. But if I know immediately what high shoulder is, okay, I can fix high shoulder.
Yeah. Priceless.
Interesting, MJ. You mentioned 3 sports. My reading this week: tennis, baseball.
Yeah.
This guy gets it right, but I have something to tell you about all 3. And this.
There
And
you
I have some
go.
other ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all talking about being in the present, etc. And they're all using the same, similar terms. You know, you have to know what your point of focus is and get the job done. You have to know your job and get the job done. You have to stay on focus. They're all using the same set of undefined terms. And that leaves the coach then in bewilderment about how to teach this to their archer. So
Yeah.
they're all on they're on the same topic. And I agree with them, that's the topic, but how do we teach it? So I think
Certainly is
my
not a
book
lot of
is filling that void.
Yeah.
Or trying to, starting to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And this was an
Annika Sorensen.
Say that again, MJ.
Annika Sorensen, the woman golfer, her coaches wrote several books, and they define decision making and then process. That there is a specific time to be thinking about, and then there's a time to allow it to happen. Every shot must have a purpose, is really poignant to what Larry was talking about. Is we think about what we want to have happen, and then we allow that to happen, and then an evaluation of, did it work?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we're gonna call it a day on this topic. We really went way further than I expected, but it's necessary. And like I said, these are topics that I think coaches deal with. They don't really have access to talk about it. They're dealing with it on the fly in some ways, especially new coaches.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that next week we may continue talking about that other scenario a little bit, although it really does all of which we talked about today applies to that other scenario of shooters getting angry on the line, shooters throwing tantrums, having a fit, talking negative self-talk. It's all changing the mindset, and getting as far away from focusing on score as possible and focusing on that present process and how you do that and what you do. And I guess, you'll probably see Larry and I soon, hopefully, we'll probably talk about that today, get together and shoot some videos, some how-to videos, some form videos and stuff like that to put a visual to the words of what people are looking for, what to look for when, as coaches. So MJ, you guys had a Paralympic team had a heck of a weekend here, didn't they?
Yes, we did. We fared very well in Monterrey, Mexico. We secured 2 more slots. That our Paralympic team now has 7 slots for the country to fill out for the games in Tokyo. W1 Leah Coriel won a gold medal, and Emma Rose Ravish recurve silver medal. She shot really exceptionally well. A pretty tough group, and the big success is that the Para Archery in the Americas is getting stronger, which means that we're going to have archery back in the Para Pan Am Games in 2023.
Wow.
Excellent.
Huge.
Oh, you get the golf clap for that one. That's outstanding. Congratulations to you and Griv and your team of coaches for the U.S. Paralympic team. That's just awesome.
Fantastic.
It's awesome. So much
Yeah.
awesomeness.
Pretty
there.
cool.
What's that, Larry?
Fantastic.
Definitely. Well, I think we're going to call it a day for everyone on Instagram. Thank you for joining us. For everyone, our
Thanks a bunch, everybody.
coaches and shooters and parents and that have joined us on Zoom for this recording. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to go to our Facebook page for the International Archery Institute and look at all of our events, any classes that we're developing or that are ready to be enrolled in are there as part of the events there. You could also go to www.virtualuniversityofarchery.com, which is International Archery Institute's website. We also have a Facebook group. Most of the stuff I post on Instagram, and we have something new coming. But make sure if you're in for a class or you're interested in a class, don't wait until the last week to sign up, because if there's we don't have 8 people in a class, the class won't fly. It'll have to be postponed. So slowly though, that I'm seeing that we're starting to see more and more. Nothing's ever been offered like this. So I understand that you're gonna have some, maybe some people are wishy-washy and stuff like that. But I think the more that we provide these podcasts, the more we put out the information, people understand like we're here to provide continuing education and to try to improve archery from the ground up. And there's not really an archery education entity out there. And that's what this is for. This is to improve the first arrow. This is to improve coaches' ability to work with their shooters and just archery as a whole. So,
and we're available to everybody that can get in front of a computer somewhere
across the world. And we have people watching this that we've worked with that are literally across the world. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Signing off from the Archery
everybody.
CoachCast.